Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. We are today going to focus on a challenge that is happening throughout the United States, more of a challenge in some municipalities. And I'm specifically talking about the housing shortage. There is a big situation going on right now, especially with the price of housing right now, rentals, interest rates making it challenging as well. And we're going to start with a partner in the construction and litigation practice groups at Greenspoon, Marder. And she is definitely, without a doubt, our professional of the year. Carol Sigmond joins us today on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you back here. And this whole housing situation, the housing shortage, if you will, has exponentially become more of a challenge even in the last, I would say, 3 years, looking at, my information. What are your overall thoughts right now?
This is a very tough problem, and there are a number of factors that are kind of feeding it. One is that baby boomers are not retiring and not downsizing. So they are remaining in their homes and apartments. They're not moving to smaller locations. So that's number one. Number two, the millennials and the Gen Xers are, they're looking to be in home, and there are a lot of them. It's a huge population group. It's the biggest population group since the baby boomers, and the baby boomers were always considered the lump in the snake's throat. So you've got two enormous groups, one coming into the housing market and one not leaving. So those are the first two problems. The next problem is that there hasn't been enough investment in housing, and there needs to be some hard looks at really creative investment plans to try to create a better market, better market conditions for building more housing. And those are, to my way of thinking, three factors. There's a fourth one lurking out there that I want to be careful about talking about, but at least want to take a passing nudge at it. It looks like there has been some price fixing in the rental markets. And there's some recent activity by the administration, the Biden administration's FTC, to begin to investigate this and to attack it. There are also private lawsuits, and there are even some state attorney generals looking at it. But there are organizations that are, presenting as if they're trade associations, but they are in fact creating the possibility for everyone to know what their competitors are charging, and it's taken the competition out of the market.
Wow. So essentially, what you're referring to is the price for rentals is what it is, but everybody is charging it. I'll be honest with you, I'm in between houses right now. I sold a home a year ago, just not the right time to buy in terms of the market, in terms of the interest rate. So I figured, all right, let me rent for a little while. Crushing, because I'm just throwing money away, but it is what it is. And I'm looking around like anybody else is, and all of the rental prices are in the same area and or higher. So it's almost as if somebody looked at the entire landscape and said, we're not going to go below a certain amount because we can get it. So is that what you're referring to when you talk about the price fixing?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm on Long Island, by the way, Long Island, New York. So I know that you're in New York City. So it is a real challenge. It really, really is.
Yeah, but there are episodes involving Chicago, Philadelphia, student housing in various locations. I believe there's a lawsuit out west. I can't remember where. This is something that to its credit, the administration and some of the state attorneys general did follow some reporting in the media and began to do their own investigating. And there are lawsuits pending, so this issue is not being ignored. Fortunately, the administration is looking at it, and as I say, states' attorney generals are as well. So uh, that that may help a little, but it takes time to unwind these, and it takes time to to unwind this type of a scheme, and then it takes time to sort it out financially.
Sure.
It will get sorted. No, it will get sorted. I think one of the hardest things for people to realize is how slowly things like this in the regulatory world work sometimes with the government. They can't wave a magic wand and make it go away. They have to follow process. They have to go through procedure. They have to do publication, and they have to do due process, and they have to prove their case to a judge. But, with time and perseverance, they will.
Where do you think it went wrong? When you look at development, urban planning, all of that, didn't they foresee that the population situation was going to be what it is now?
Where did it go wrong? So the first thing I think that no one anticipated was all of the shift in our lives caused by the baby boomers. First of all, it was an enormous generation, born between 1946 and 1964, with the bulk of it born between 47 and 57. You had a big group of people. They didn't behave the way their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents behaved. The first thing that happened is substantial numbers of women from that group entered the labor market, and not simply in the old traditional pink-collar jobs, but they went everywhere, and many more of them entered the labor market. So you had that big shift. You've had many more, the divorce rates picked up, so you had many more families with two homes, and the sort of multiple complicated families that we have with, divorces and stepchildren and step-siblings and that sort of thing. So we have all of those trends were new, and they all affected the housing market. Housing and housing construction has always been tax sensitive, and I'm not completely sure that the tax code aligned incentive-wise with the housing situation. For example, for many, many years, the SALT deduction, state, local, and property taxes applied not only to primary homes but also second homes. There were many people who thought that SALT deduction should have been limited to primary residences, which might have encouraged the construction of more primary residences. Then we had two lending crises. You had the S&L crisis in the 70s and early 80s that took out massive numbers of home lenders because it used to be the S&Ls that did a lot of home mortgages. And you had the second lending crisis in 2000, can argue about when it starts, but let's call it 2007, when that crisis began. And that was, as you recall, massive and took out many people's homes. So you had two lending crises. You've had, a housing boom that crashed with the second lending crisis, and so it's been an unstable market. You couple it with the hedge funds coming in and buying a lot of housing, and then this price fixing scheme that seems to be out there, and you have a lot of forces that were not contemplated.
Thanks for bringing that to light, because a number of things you mentioned I forgot about, and also the aging population is, like you said, not what was expected, because we are living longer. If you went back 30 years, you might not realize that baby boomers would be around as long as they are, and they're still working. Definitely resonating with people. Kelly checks in from Orlando, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. She says, I'm seeing many apartments being built, but the prices are almost untouchable. I don't see how anyone is able to afford them. I also hear that many apartment complexes must set aside units for Section 8 housing. Can you tell me if that's true?
Okay, so let me deal with affordable housing. There are a number of approaches being taken in different states and communities, but a lot of developers are being offered benefits if they will, at some locations build affordable housing. So in New York, you can in effect buy credits that will allow you to build a bigger building in one location, in exchange for which you either build affordable housing or you finance someone else's building of affordable housing at another location. Not uncommon. Different cities are doing it in different ways. But yes, there is definitely pressure on developers to build affordable housing. Not all of it is Section 8. Some of it can be moderate income housing. Some of it is Section 8 housing. It just depends on the program and the community and the development.
Is it a situation where no matter where you are, how big your apartment complex is as an owner, that some of it has to be set aside for, quote unquote, affordable housing and or Section 8?
That depends. Yes and no. It depends on what the zoning requires in the particular location. It depends on what the local government is zoning regulations are. It may depend on the lender's requirements. I think one thing that's really important to understand is that mixed housing, that is to say housing that is a mix of different income levels and different people and different size units, is probably desirable. So the notion that you would be in a development where scattered in the development are some Section 8 housing or there's some affordable units scattered in the unit, it should not concern anyone. Current research is not showing that it's affecting property values. It's not affecting safety. It's not causing crime. The only time that we've seen that type of issue is when we have concentrated in crowded and poorly maintained public housing areas, like those homes in Chicago that they finally blew up. They demolished because they were just such difficult places. But mixed neighborhoods are not having a problem, and that should not be a concern.
Can you tell? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, people just shouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, and I guess it's a concern. If you're paying a certain amount for rent, you're wondering who your neighbors are going to be. The YES proposal, I've heard about it, don't have a lot of details. What can you tell us about that?
So the YES proposal is intended to remove regulatory blocks from either new housing, denser housing, housing in non-traditional housing areas, and conversions of commercial buildings. So YES is trying to do spot upzoning. YES is trying to loosen some regulations that might prohibit housing in certain areas where there's no real reason to prohibit it other than it's just never been there before. They've been looking at that sort of issue. The biggest area of YES that I think of is in conversions of commercial buildings to residential in New York City, and that's one of the big issues in the YES program. Also, increased density is a very big part of it. Part of what the city is trying to do is increase density for housing in areas around subway stations, which makes sense because then you have development concentrated at a transportation hub where people can get on the transportation and get to work. It makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of little quirkies with it, so I'll give you one from my neighborhood on the Upper East Side. So the density in my area is increasing. First of all, the Upper East Side is the most densely populated residential area in the world, bar none. Okay, that's it. More dense, more people per square mile than even in Hong Kong. So you can look at the Upper East Side and you can see what happens when you increase density too much, which may be where the East Side is bordering. Number one, the sewer infrastructure isn't necessarily able to handle it. We have more and more sewer backups in big storms, and not even a very big storm. It doesn't take a very big storm to cause a lot of street flooding. It's been getting worse. Part of the reason, there are just more people, more toilets flushing, more people, more roof runoff, just more. One thing to consider. Number two, the city is rapidly having to increase electrical capacity in all of these heavily constructed areas. Some places there's room in the street to do it, not everywhere. One of the yes proposals is what's calling infilling in certain developments, such as in two large developments on the Lower East Side, where they want to infill in Cooper Villages and one other location. I'll think of it in a minute. They want to infill. They want to add housing. They want to add it in Co-op City as well. The problem is when they built the infrastructure, they didn't build enough sewer lines. They didn't build enough electrical power. They don't have enough infrastructure underground to take the infill. The other problem is, where do you infill? Because you've already got these sewer lines and water lines and electric lines already in existence. You're going to try to move them all? That's a wildly expensive problem and proposition. So you've got big issues with the YES program, which on paper looks much better than I think it's going to prove out to be in reality. I think parts of it are going to work. Increasing density in the outer boroughs around existing subway stations will probably work. Increasing density on the Upper East Side. Here's a little fun fact. The Upper East Side needs a new classroom every single day to accommodate the people who are moving in. There's no place to put the schools because when they planned all of this, they didn't plan for schools. So there's a shortage of schools on the Upper East Side.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you do this sort of thing, the city's YES program, you got to think about where do kids go to school. Now, what do I think they should do? Maybe we should take a school building or two and take it down and rebuild it as a high-rise school with mixed use, high school, junior high, elementary school, just take existing property, existing buildings and make them bigger by making them taller. One possibility. Don't know if it will work, but it's a possibility. There's huge resistance to taking parks. People will fight taking any park land away, and that's understandable. The cost to condemn property to get a school is tough, very expensive. To go back to the lady from Orlando's question, housing has gotten expensive. It's gotten expensive because money is expensive for the developer. It's gotten expensive because construction materials went up during the COVID situation. It's gotten expensive because labor costs have increased. There's a labor shortage. There are supply chain issues. All of that is impacting the cost of construction for housing. So there's a lot of moving pieces. So you want to talk solutions, or at least a possible solution. New York had one of the most effective housing programs with Mitchell-Lama. They had state loans. They had state funding. They were able to build, big middle class, working class buildings that were well maintained. They had a mechanism for buying and selling them within a protected market. The worst thing that happened to housing in New York was the end of Mitchell-Lama. So many of those units went into the market and became market rate units, which allowed the prices to increase. And so many people started in Mitchell-Lama building, like Co-op City. So I think New York should bring back some form of Mitchell-Lama. The current plan that we have in New York is something called a 421A tax abatement, which does help. But I think Mitchell-Lama was much more effective because it was a much longer plan. The housing stayed in the protected moderate income housing world for much, much longer. And, through turnovers and changes of ownership.
I mean, I love your idea of the high-rise renovation to schools because it makes perfect sense. You're taking existing space and using it more effectively for the population. My concern is the highest part of your taxes, your property taxes, come from schools. So I can't imagine what that's going to do.
Well, what choice do we have?
Right? Yeah. And we haven't
we have to build schools. We have to have schools for the kids to go to.
And that doesn't even get into, and for a whole other podcast, or maybe not, the immigration situation, where now you have even more people coming into cities and municipalities, you know, you have housing, you have schooling, and all of that. That's a whole other.
Well, the big immigration crunch that hit at the beginning of the end of the Trump administration, beginning of the Biden administration, which has finally eased off, is a whole different issue, and I would suggest to you is very much tied to climate change.
Really? We have like a minute left, but how do you tie that in?
To me, if you look at worldwide population movement and you see people leaving the southern hemisphere, heading for the northern hemisphere, not only in the Americas, but also Africa and Europe, you see very quickly that climate is pushing people to move. And lack of stability and lack of opportunity in these countries. The best thing that we can do is try and fund programs in Central America and in Northern Latin America to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable in their home countries so they're not, risking everything to get to America.
It's an interesting point you bring up, and certainly the opportunity may not be in those countries, but I never considered the climate aspect of it. So pretty fascinating when you take some time to really process that. Honestly, Carol, that was not even on my radar. Wow. Appreciate everything today. You have such deep insight, and this is just a piece of what you do in terms of your litigation and working with the practice. If somebody has a question or they want to be representative, what's the best way to find you?
Oh, my email address. It's Carol, Carol, Sigmond, Sigmond, @gmlaw.com. And I do try to answer all my emails.
Excellent. Wonderful talking with you today. Love all the insight. We have a problem. It's not going away anytime soon. And I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.